So we're going to talk today about a film in the Dark Shadows oeuvre that could have been a classic like House of Dark Shadows, but due to some editorial interference, big studio interference, and a bad editing suite, what could have been a great movie is a shambles of what it should be, even though it's a 2 star out of 4 movie, could have been 3.5 easily. Today we're going to talk about the movie Night of Dark Shadows, based on the Dark Shadows TV series and the unofficial sequel to the very popular House of Dark Shadows. It centers on the story of Quentin Collins and his bride Tracy at the Collingwood Mansion in Collingsport, Maine. Now, the movie includes David Selby, Lara Parker, John Carlin, Kate Jackson, Grayson Hall, and Nancy Barrett, which were major stars in the Dark Shadows TV series. But this was not as successful as House of Dark Shadows because the 95-minute version that was released was incoherent from an editing standpoint, and most of the major plot points were taken out due to time. Now, the film, which marked the feature film debut of David Selby and Kate Jackson, features handsome young artist Quentin Collins, who arrives at his newly inherited estate of Collingwood with his beautiful wife Tracy. They meet the housekeeper Carlotta Drake and the caretaker Gerald Stiles. Quentin eventually happens upon a 19th century portrait of a blonde woman with captivating green eyes that seem to mesmerize him. Carlotta informs it that the woman is Angelique, who had lived there over 100 years earlier. The Collins' friends Alex and Claire Jenkins, who have co-written several successful horror novels, move into a cottage on the estate to keep them company. Now, Quentin soon begins to be troubled by startling visions and haunting dreams about one of his ancestors, Charles Collins, and his ancestor's mistress Angelique, who had been hung as a witch in a past century. Carlotta eventually reveals to Quentin that she's the reincarnation of Sarah Castle, a little girl who had lived at Collingwood over 150 years ago, and that Quentin himself as the reincarnation of Charles Collins. Charles has had an affair with Angelique, wife of his brother Gabriel, resulting in her being hanged, and Charles being sealed alive in the family crypt with Angelique's corpse. On a trip to New York City, the Jenkinses discover a painting of Charles Collins, which bears an uncanny resemblance to Quentin. Convinced that their friends are in grave danger, the couple hurry home to Collingwood, where they are attacked by the ghost of Angelique. Meanwhile, Quentin has become possessed by the spirit of Charles Collins and attempts to drown Tracy in a disused swimming pool on the estate. Alex and Claire arrive in time to revive her, but Quentin, having no memory of his actions, refuses to believe their wild tale. Now, Carlotta and Jared conspire to eliminate Quentin's loved ones. Quentin, seeing the scratches on his wrist where Tracy had tried to fend him off, realizes the truth of Alex's warning and rushes to rescue his friends. Jared has managed to take Tracy prisoner, despite his having been shot in the face by Claire, and Quentin fights with him atop a train trestle. As Gerald slashes Quentin's cheek with a knife, creating a gash in his left cheek that looks remarkably like the one Charles Collins had, Tracy rushes to try to save her husband. She strikes Gerard with a nearby plank, knocking him off Quentin and onto the edge of the trestle. He teeters on the edge for a moment, then plunges to his death after Tracy pushes him. The group rush back to Collingswood to confront Carlotta. As they arrive, she jumps from the top of the house when she sees the ghost of Angelique beckon her from below. In the end, the two couples prepare to leave Collingwood forever. Alex and Claire leave first, with Quentin and Tracy following. However, instead of driving away, Quentin returns to the house saying he intends to retrieve some canvases. When he fails to come back, Tracy follows, only to find him now completely possessed by Charles Collins. Angelique enters the room, reborn in the flesh. The camera freezes on Tracy's face as she begins to scream as Quentin and Angelique advance on her. A UPI news wire shown at the end reveals that Alex and Claire Jenkins have been killed in a car accident, and witnesses reported seeing a ghostly fog fill the car as they veered off the road. Now, the unreleased director's cut of this is 129 minutes. Budget was $900,000. They made an okay at the box office, $1.4 million. What do you expect from a Dan Curtis directed and produced movie would be on time. Now, after success of House of Dark Shadows, the 1970 feature film version of Curtis's gothic soap Dark Shadows, MGM was more than willing to begin a follow-up And in 1971, Curtis originally wanted to do a direct sequel and revive the vampire Barnabas Collins. Actor Jonathan Frid, however, refused to play the role again for fear of being typecast. Realizing it would be a mistake to recast a popular character, Curtis worked with writer Sam Hall to concoct an all-new storyline. Now, when filming started on March 29, 1971, under the title Curse of Dark Shadows, and without the headaches of producing the television series concurrently, the production crew was able to achieve a far more polished product than that of the previous year, and I tend to agree. But the cutting of it is just terrible. Now, in order to give the production some authenticity, Spirituals Hans Hosler was employed as an advisor to production, though his actual contribution to the finished product proved minimal. Now, the story again was loosely based on the parallel time sequence of the TV series, and centered on the show's other popular male lead, Quentin Collins, who played a werewolf in the Dark Shadow series, or mostly a werewolf. Now, it was shot in 6 weeks and a budget of $900,000. When released in '71, the show had already been off the air. It was not unsuccessful, but was less successful than the predecessor. Again, making about a $600,000 profit. Now, Hall's script, developed in conjunction with Curtis, was a wistful tale of gothic romance and supernatural reincarnation, bolstered by credible performances from Selby, Kay Jackson, and Grayson Hall, who's always tremendous at what she does. When filming completed without major problems, Curtis set about editing the final film, which proved far denser and more complex than House of Dark Shadows. One reason often cited for the film's lack of performance is that MGM forced Curtis to cut over 35 minutes from the finished film, and gave him only 24 hours to do the job. Thus, the film went from 129 minutes to 94 minutes, which, according to some, caused the film to lose its coherence. And you'll see in the movie where scenes basically jump and there's no what they call flow or dissolve style. Now, much of the excised footage was recovered in '99, but it was without sound. This material consists of 16 never-before-seen sequences, extending over a dozen existing scenes, reinstating the darker mood and restoring the original structure and continuity. Highlights of the discovery including flashback between the Doom lover Charles and Angelique, 2 new scenes featuring menacing groundskeeper Gerald Stiles, several romantic interludes between Quentin and Tracy, a candlelit exorcism sequence in the gallery, which was the film's original climax, and the hanging sequence, as well as several other scenes with intensity on par with an R-rated film. Now, both Night of Dark Shadows and House of Dark Shadows were released on VHS on September 1st, 1998, and on DVD and Blu-ray on October 30th, 2012. The DVD and Blu-ray releases of Night of Dark Shadows and House of Dark Shadows were the first films to be released in the U.S. with a GP rating. While not as good as the first one, I can tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, Nancy Baird and Lara Parker are luminous in this. And Kay Jackson, the future Charlie's Angels, again gives a very, very structured performance. But it was also good to see Taylor David come back in this one. He plays Reverend Strack. So it's a gothic film, but if they can ever find the 35 minutes with sound, I think it's well worth it to reinstate the full Curtis vision. But for me, it's a late night movie. Good to be seen after 2 o'clock in the morning where you don't have to think it out. But not as vampiric, of course, as the original Dark Shadows movie. So that's the story of the great Night of Dark Shadows. I still give it a 2 stars out of 4. Not because it's not a 3-star movie, but the editing is just terrible. Thanks for listening.